finance series, Make Money Beautiful by Sipping Thoughts in partnership with Salt. Today, we are here to discuss a very interesting topic, financial planning and budgeting basics for women. And, we have a very interesting panelist also today. So, I'll introduce you to our panelists. First of all, we have Shinjini Kumar, who is the co-founder of Salt. She has worked for 3 decades in financial services in senior positions. Shinjini has studied in English literature, journalism, and public policy. She just started learning Hindustani classical music and is a disaster at it. Yeah, so she's also the co-founder of Indian Novel Collectives and writes short fiction. Hi, Shinjini, welcome. Next up, we have Preethi. She's also known for her Instagram handle as Peppy Travel Girl. She's a travel mad experience chaser who quit her corporate job at a multinational bank to chase what her heart called out for. She's a blogger, and she also hosts a podcast discussion. Hi, Preethi. Welcome. Lastly, we have with us Miss Monica Jasuja, who is the product management professional specializing in fintech and payments, with global experience of 4 geographies in Fortune 500 companies, now leading the genesis for the next wave of digital financial solutions. Hi, Monica. So to take the session forward, we have the host for today's session, Ms. Disha Shah, who is recognized as Ashoka Young Changemaker for increasing women's financial literacy. She's a creator at Moola, a personal finance channel on YouTube and Instagram. She's also a part of the Salt team. And, there was a very interesting point and reason why we picked up these finance series, and to explain the reason and the importance of financial planning, we have with us Miss Meeta Gudgudia, who's the co-founder of Sipping Thoughts and co-founder of Phones and Petals. So I'll quickly ask Meeta ma'am to come forward and explain us the importance and all.
Thank you, Ashita. You have done the job beautifully. So everybody is here together. I think it's the sunlight. Okay. So at Sipping Thought, we know that we have been coming forward with all the topics that matters to a woman. And we realize we have done discussion with more than 500 people. And we realize that we talk about empowerment, strength, freedom, independence, a woman, whatever she needs to do. And it stops at finance. So whatever you do in life, if you don't have money, you cannot be confident. If you cannot be confident, you can't manage your life. So we have not touched this topic before because we had been waiting for right people to come and join. And rather than touching and going, we wanted to do the discussion in detail where people get benefited by it. And to tell you honestly, even I hate the term money and finance. I manage all, but it's just that you always keep the file at the bottom. Okay, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. So I will be sitting with you all to kind of learn myself. So I know that whatever age it is, learning never stops. And finance is something that is the need of the hour if we truly want to be independent. So on that note, I welcome Preethi, Monica, Shinjini, Disha, the young cute girl. And so yeah, I know I'm never formal, so just take my informal approach in an informal way. So from me to your team, Disha. So welcome here.
Thank you so much. If I'm smiling uncontrollably, it's just because I'm excited, so bear with me. Welcome all of you to today's session brought to you by Sipping Thoughts and Salt. It is also very exciting because today is the first of a series, Make Money Beautiful. Today's panel is on budgeting and financial planning. And honestly, we could not have put a better trio together. Maybe for selfish reasons, but as I'm starting out on my own career and personal finance journey, I'm curious to learn the different perspectives that each of you bring from your journeys. Whether it is digiting the traditional route and pursuing your passion, which honestly is so courageous, it is insane. I can't even begin to fathom it, or climbing the professional ladder, or building something of your own. I think any of these decisions that you've had to take in life, an important factor to consider was money. On that note, I want to start by asking Preethi the first question. Growing up, I often heard about money more as a barrier, as a restriction in life. But you have been a great example of how you've used money as a tool to pursue your passions and to open up doors for you. Was this always the case?
Thanks, Disha. Um, so if I have to talk about, my own journey, how my journey with finance began, I come from a very conservative household myself. It's a typical traditional middle class household where you're always taught that financial independence is important, saving is primary. So if you look at my journey career-wise, it wasn't as interesting as one might think. If you're typical, go to school, go to college, do your MBA, get a job. And that's exactly where I was at. I joined the bank. And I never had any financial education, so to speak, because the focus was always on saving and saving and saving more because money was looked at as a scarce resource and not as something that could grow and actually, help you grow in your career as well. So it wasn't always the case that, now when I'm sitting here with my own passion pursuing business, if I might call it that, I'm sitting here with that, but it's been such a challenging journey to move from looking at money as a resource that can either be spent or saved, and to move into looking at it as something that can be invested and bifurcating that sum into what one would call your expenses, your savings, and your capital. Because when I left my job, right, I had to stop looking at money as just something that I could use for expenses. I had to look at expenses as investments as well. My investments weren't just SIPs or mutual funds or FDs. Every time I had to invest in a laptop because I edit videos on a regular basis, I need something that is high powered. Every time I look at purchasing something that is going to cause a bit of a dent in my bank account, shifting my mindset from, oh my God, I'm spending money on a laptop to, oh my God, I'm investing in my business. That was a journey that really changed the game for me. So moving from saving to, okay, let's take this amount of money, invest it into my business and use that business to make more money. I think for me, that journey has been a long one, but given that I'm a first gen entrepreneur in my family, it has been a huge learning experience along the way, and it has definitely strengthened my own relationship with money in general.
That's so nice to hear. I think just like mindset shift is so important when it comes to money. And just by the way you articulated how this journey has shifted, I feel like that smile of confidence always tells you that now you know what your relationship with money is. And that's so nice. Just from this perspective, it would be very interesting if Shinjini, you could share your thoughts, because if any of you here know Shinjini, you know that she's not thought about money, barrier or a tool. So then how has money served your life? You're on mute.
Yes. I'm going to just start out by telling you the most physical way that I started my relationship with money. So my first job was with the Reserve Bank of India, and I was posted in RBI Delhi. I was 22 something, and they gave me the key of the currency notes vault. And I was supposed to be responsible for all the money that got taken out and got back taken in. Of course, I had other people in the team, but I just looked at all that money and my jaw fell open, because I had this habit of saying, oh my God, I've never seen that money in my life. I would say that for small amounts of money, for 500 rupees, for 5,000 rupees. And now suddenly there was no amount of money for which I could use that phrase, because I had actually seen all the money that there was. And it was not just currency notes and coins. It was also the jewels of all the presidents of India that had received, and I had to take charge of that. So I'm just trying to describe to you a very visual way in which my relationship with money started, because on the one hand was this little salary that I had as a government servant, but also a huge amount of job security. So when you start your career in a government service, then you don't think about your immediate sort of journey, because you know that you have a long-term journey ahead and you will end up, in a place where you will be taken care of. So, which is the reason why, as you said, I don't think about money. That started because of that particular situation where I started out in a sort of a secure career. Having said that, at some point of time, I realized that I went to grad school. So after I started working, I took a break and I went to do my master's. That's because when I had joined the central bank, I was an English literature and journalism graduate. And then I realized that that wasn't going to work for me. So I went to US to do a master's in public policy. I already had a child by then, and which essentially meant that I had to live on a scholarship. I had to live on a really small, but really small budget. Of the 900 or $950 that I got as my fellowship for the month, I used to spend 400 on my house rent and another 350 on my kids' school. And so I had like $150 to live by. And I lived on that. And that's when and the reason I'm telling you this story is because in different stages in your life, you will shift your way of thinking about money and budgeting and planning. And I think it is important to be conscious of that and aware of that and not be caught by surprise, which is the point that we are trying to make in today's panel. So, when Preethi talks about learning to change her approach from saving to investing and treating it as capital on which returns will happen, as I go ahead, I'll talk about how I learned to think about liquidity versus capital versus my day-to-day money, and that's when you tell yourself, yes, it's fine, I'm living on a shoestring budget, but I'm making an investment in myself. I knew that by doing that, by getting that education, I was building for myself a future that would be rewarding. So that 2 years of doing your master's on a shoestring budget is not a sad memory for me at all. It's actually a very happy memory. It's a very happy memory to say that, I would look for a $5 pizza coupon because the only way I would eat pizza was using that coupon. And then you go through that phase. But the reason my personal money story is interesting to a lot of young people, or should be interesting to a lot of people, it's because, and I didn't come like Preethi, I also came from a relatively not a rich background, so it's not like I had any inherited capital, but I was the capital. So I was investing in myself. I was becoming that source of capital on which I was going to build that future. And as it happened in my case, I did get a lot of money. I used to joke. It's on my Instagram. I used to say, if God wants me to be rich, he'll leave a suitcase of money in my house, because I used to always take investing advice very casually. I used to make fun of people who used to save money. And as it happened, because I had invested in me, I did get a lot more money. One thing I gradually learned, and we'll talk about it as we go forward, is how to then use that money. So for me, those lessons of dealing with money came in different phases, in different ways, but they have always been helpful because I've been conscious about it. It's not been something that has happened at the back of my head or somebody else has taken care of it. So primarily that.
I feel like there are so many interesting parts of the story that can be elaborated on a whole different session altogether. But just because you mentioned that you've seen money on the backside where it was made, my next question goes to Monica, who's also been on the backside of creating many of these money tools that all of us use now. Knowing and understanding the industry from the backside, do you think it's influenced your personal finance journey in any particular way?
Actually, I'm not sure, because I was thinking so much about money all the time in terms of how you make the journey so easy, that I think I probably got scared by the whole aspect of how to deal with money. And that, I think, has been my biggest failing, at the same time my biggest learning. Because when you're dealing with all these financial products, you're actually at the front end of trying to understand how customers are using them without understanding. And at that point in time, as much as I hate to admit this, you're also trying to make them spend more, do more with their money. And that's when you realize that, and it's a very rewarding industry. Everybody who's been in it will tell you that it's, tech and fintech has now just not become popular right now. It always was. So you're paid a certain amount. You're really being seen and dining and wining and traveling with all the best in the whole world. You don't realize what money means to you until such time that you actually have a problem or there are issues. And let me give you a very quick example of what that can be. So there was a series of operations in the family which required a lot of wealth. When I say wealth, because the amount that was required to be paid at one time was not possible to be covered by all my credit cards even put together. That's when I realized I have absolutely no cash in my bank.
And for somebody like me to even admit this, especially when you're working with money all the time, you realize how bad your financial decisions and investments have been, that you don't even have an emergency fund to tap into, which really, and that is the basics of money for every single person, whether man or woman, which is you should have an emergency fund equal to X amounts of your monthly salary, but depending on your needs. And we were anticipating this, just didn't anticipate the amount. And that for me was a wake up call, apart from all the other wake up calls that we had. But that's when you realize that you've been so so almost consumed by the whole energy and therefore the momentum of when you're dealing with money, that you've forgotten what it is to actually do with your money when you have it. And especially when you don't have it, then what do you do with it? Because you still have to deal with that situation as an adult. And sometimes as a mature adult, it's extremely embarrassing. So exactly like what Shinjini said, I wouldn't say that I was as embarrassed as at that point in time. It was an actual debilitating need that was finally met, and that's fine. But after that, I think the whole relationship changed, and I also started really analyzing what I was doing, which was about my capital, where I was investing on my capital, and what kind of decisions they were. So took charge, but we'll talk about that as we go forward.
That's amazing. I think the whole aspect of an emergency fund, someone who just got her first paycheck a month back, I had so many plans of what I was going to do with it and how I was going to save and invest, because I live with my parents, so I have the luxury of saving more, investing more. But the minute money hit the bank, in 2 weeks, it was all gone, right? So my next question is, someone who's gotten salary after salary, like a regular income job, what is the one thing you think salaried people take for granted?
Is that
just a month? Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
I think it's the next paycheck. And you have your tied expenses, and I'll be extremely honest and upfront here. The whole EMI, the wave that we are seeing right now, I've never taken anything on an EMI. I was forced to take it because I'm on the back end. So I knew that there were a lot of offers going on. And I'm telling you what I have done now. I'm admitting this for the first time ever. I've actually paid more in interest now. I could have just paid it upfront because I just took that stupid loan, thinking to myself that because I'll get a lot of points back and everything, and it doesn't work. That's just not me. And that's where I realized that all the stuff that I've been thinking about, it's including as a salaried professional, I've never lived out of my means, but even my savings, even my expenditures were really not planned and well thought through. So, for example, let's take a small example. You think about a jar and you put your money in a jar and you try to save as much. You try to divide your expenditures into what you will be doing, and that's when you start, looking and planning for the worst as well as the best. But as a salaried person, all that you have is the comfort of knowing next month will be better. Even if this month I overspend, you have your credit card, so there is a backup. In your case, you have parents, there is a backup and stuff like that. So it keeps accumulating and it keeps getting pushed back into a corner. The second thing is, the fact is that you always think you're going to get another job which is going to pay you more and more and more. So if you do make a wrong financial decision, you can always back it up. What happens, however, in later in life is that it's not as easy to get jobs or to switch jobs or to get better and bigger. You are paid more in terms of how, in terms of equity. You can't just value and devalue your equity in every single moment. So you don't have literally cash. So it's one of those things that you learn with time. Nobody really tells you, and maybe there is a bro network out there. But at least from what I have seen, women don't tend to invest in instruments which are going to be able to help them when they need it the most, and which is what my learning was, and I'll happily share it as we go along.
I think that's such an interesting learning, because my learning when I spent all my money was that, okay, you know what, maybe I should do something more next month to earn more money. But I didn't stop and think, what am I going to do to kind of plan my purchases in a way that it lasts me the whole month? It's crazy how my next thought was I should just earn more and not kind of work on planning what's happening here. That's very interesting. Now, salary to salaried itself, there's quite a bit of anxiousness and so many mishappenings. My next question is to Preethi. Going from having regular income and the kind of security you did to an irregular income, what is the one money habit that you swear by in this journey?
So when you go from having a constant salary, I think one thing that Monica rightly said is that you genuinely tend to just take your next salary for granted. But for me, I think that was the biggest anxiety inducing element of the entire journey, because all of a sudden you don't know where your next paycheck is coming from. And you just have to, like, I've always been a bit of a planner when it comes to finances. But when all of a sudden you don't have that monthly ding in your account and you don't know how much you're getting next month, you don't know when that next paycheck is coming in, you don't know how much you have to follow up with your next company to pay your freelance bills. It can be extremely difficult. But one thing that has really kept me, going and has held me in good stead, and I remember I've spoken to Shinjini about this as well. I keep track of my expenses. Like, it is it's such a simple thing to do, right? Like, if I were to ask someone today, if I were to ask you today, do you know where your money is going exactly? Chances are you have a broad idea, but you don't know exactly how much you're spending on X, how much on Y, and how much on Z. And you don't know how much of it was necessary and how much of it was just an impulse buy on Myntra because there was a sale or you just wanted to eat out one day. These things really add up. And during my internship, I had literally kept like a day-to-day account of my expenses because I really wanted to buy myself something pretty at the end of it. And I think that's one thing that has really held me in good stead till date, knowing where my money is going. So whether that's in terms of expenses or whether that's in terms of allocating my money towards investments and capital expenses and savings, I genuinely just try to stay on top of that. And especially when you move from, a salary to a self-employed perspective, I think I really need to be more on top of things when it comes to planning in advance. Because again, it's an irregular income. So I need to always have a buffer for maybe 3 months or 6 months, depending on my lifestyle, depending on the kind of business expenses I'll be incurring. So I think one thing that I do even now is stay a little paranoid. And whenever I get, I know what my yearly fixed expenses are. So like whenever I earn and however my months look like, I tend to clear off those fixed expenses first. I tend to clear off my ATC or whatever basic investments I have to do first. And then I go ahead with planning everything else. So to put it very simply, it is literally just knowing where your money is at. And it's a very simple thing to do, but it's because it takes a bit of effort that a lot of us tend to, just brush it aside. But that has gone on to save me from some really difficult situations financially. And it's also really helped me tide through some very difficult months in the pandemic. So that's one thing that I would genuinely recommend, whether salaried or self-employed, even more so if you're self-employed.
That's such an important point. I think often tracking expenses or budgeting is looked as such a boring task to do. But I feel like recently, even I have been trying tracking and just the impact it has on like your financial decisions, because it's so much more informed. You're so much more confident when you're making those decisions. It really, really helps for sure. Now I'm very curious. We saw an irregular income perspective and a regular perspective. Shinjini, tell me, how did you go from a high salaried regular income job to then preparing to be a startup founder? How did you plan your financial journey to support your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, that's a very important question. And I hope that that question is relevant to a lot of people, because the future, as we see it, particularly for the female economy, I mean, one of the things that we say about us at SALT is that we are preparing to take on the female economy, because the female economy will grow a lot faster than it ever has. And it will require a lot more financial prowess. And so one of the things that that we believed in was that, so this was something which was in the making for a while, because when I was in Paytm, I got to travel a lot and I got to see how perspectives on money were different for different people, needs were different, usage was different, and gender did seem to play a role. So while this idea is something that I was working on for a while, I think it was very important to have my own finances in place to be able to do that, right? Because like we heard from Monica just now, you could be a highly paid salaried professional, but your ability to disconnect and take a call actually depends on a fair bit of planning. So I do believe that a lot more women, whether they are right now at home moms or they are working in jobs, many of them will take this call to become entrepreneurs, or like Preethi, professionals and freelancers and other jobs, because that's the future. So it's an important thing for everyone to understand a little bit, to spend a little bit time reflecting on what is your goal in life? Where do you want to see yourself, not just in the next 1 year or 2 year or 3 years? That is the basic of financial planning. And somehow the financial services industry has converted that into a very dhisa pita, a very boring sort of a financial planning exercise where you go on an app and it shows you 5 goals to pick from. One is to buy a house, the other is to send your child to, I mean, it has become better, but in my days, it used to be, you send your son abroad and get your daughter married off. And, so people used to say, so financial industry prepared itself, everything, whether it was insurance, whether it was asset management, whether it was banking, whether it was lending, these were built around these traditional, sort of goals that you were supposed to have. But actually, that's not the world in which we live anymore at all. We live in a world where most people will pursue individual passions, and many of them will pursue it independently, but many of them may pursue it in freelance cohorts. So Preethi may be an individual person working on what she's working on, but she may have a cohort of people with whom she might be connecting for the purpose of her actual ticket or various things that she gets to do. And then different people specialize in those different parts of the job. So I just think that this idea of understanding where will you end up, what do you enjoy? Do you enjoy that salary high that every month you must have a paycheck, and you see yourself that at some point of time I will be a CEO, COO, I'll be a person who will have a voice. I think for everyone, it's important to figure out what is that voice for you towards the end of your career. Do you want to be that corporate office voice? Do you want to have your own? So for me, for example, it was always very clear that whatever else I may do, I will always do some sort of a not-for-profit activity. For Meeta, who's sitting here, for example, right? She has a business, but she also did Sipping Thoughts, which is a passion point. So most people will build their lives around some combination of professional career and passion points. So the reason this planning is important is because you need to have some sort of an understanding of that. In SALT, when we think about it, we think about this as a, what makes you happy, right? So think about it, not 2 years out, but 10 years out, 5 years out, 12 years out. Do you want to take a career break? Do you want to go and do higher education? What do you want to do? So for me, the entrepreneurship idea was a relatively, while I always knew I would do something in this space, the actual idea was only when, Chaitra and I started talking a couple of years ago, but it was very quickly I started to put my finances in order. So to answer your question specifically, what did I do? I built myself a pension. I took into account what savings did I have, how much of it was liquid. So that this is where I wanted to emphasize on the concept of liquidity. So everyone needs to understand that you may have savings. How much of it is liquid for you to be able to use? So for me, it was important to understand that I may have to bootstrap for a certain amount of time. Do I have enough capital to runway? Because now I'm no more responsible just for my own expenses. I will be hiring people. When I hire people, I'll be responsible for their incomes, their households. So do I have enough liquidity to support a certain number of months that we may have to bootstrap? You can't take it for granted that you will get funded as soon as you get started. So I took stock of, first of all, how much wealth did I have? Secondly, how much of it was liquid? Thirdly, how much of it was long-term assets? So it shouldn't be that, of course, we will win the world and we will do very well. But for whatever reason, if there is a crisis, something happens, where is my emergency fund that Monica talked about? How much do I have that I don't have to go and sell a property at a distressed cost to, continue to live off that? So, and then one very quick decision I took was, at that point of time, I was thinking about, buying a bigger apartment in Mumbai. And I immediately took a decision that I'll keep my small apartment. I'll not buy a bigger apartment, because really that big apartment isn't going to do anything for me. If I build this company, then maybe I can defer that decision by another 4 or 5 years. And I should keep that liquidity available to me, invest some of it in the market. My son studies in the US, so I sent enough money for him to be able to graduate. Even if he gets a scholarship, that will be an extra saving for me if he gets a scholarship. If he doesn't, at least I will not have to sit and worry about where to pay his fees from. So to answer your question specifically, the planning for becoming an entrepreneur has to be a little bit ahead of when you actually jump in. And you have to think about your money from the perspective of liquidity, your expenses, your emergency fund, your capital, and your day-to-day expenses and your ability to support. You shouldn't take anything for granted. Like, I don't take it for granted that, my husband will have an earning, or my worst comes to worst, I can take money from my family or whoever. I think preferably you should not resort to that. Preferably you should think about your money, how will you use it? You should think about things like, can I borrow against my shares? Do I have enough gold that in a worst case crisis, I will sell my gold? All of these things, all assets that you have should be for your betterment, or for the betterment of your business, or for the betterment of the society, or for the betterment of the vision that you believe in. But knowing that, putting that on a piece of paper, and then planning. So what is your pension fund? How much retirement are you likely to get? What house will you be living in? Those things are important. So I did go through that very formal planning process. I spoke to my financial advisor. I took full stock of where I was, took decisions of what I'll do for the next couple of years and not do. And that was the process of planning. Sorry, it's a long answer, but I just wanted to make sure that we don't have to come back to this answer.
No, that's actually so nice. I think even before you spoke, I wasn't considering the goal that I have, or like the option of a financial advisor, and just picking up on that. Sometimes you listen to all these different perspectives, but you don't know how to make it real for your own life. So just speaking about liquidity, Monica, you mentioned that you've been in a space where you understood the real importance of liquidity. How do you now plan liquidity for your life? Like, make it real for us. What do you do? Whether it's pen and paper calculations, sitting down with a financial advisor, or what kind of questions you ask yourself. What can someone do to understand liquidity in their own lives?
This is a great point. I'm going to take off from where Shinjini left off. I actually did plan an emergency fund 1.5 years ago, and I was planning for it for a long time. So it wasn't something that I can just, put a month's salary. It just wasn't that way. And it was supposed to be a considerable amount exactly for the kind of expenses it's meant for. So how I went about doing that was that depending on your monthly income, your yearly income, you will always have those big lows and troughs. Whenever there is a high, at that point in time, you allocate more, but you keep allocating to a separate bank account. Now, that's something I learned from Monica Hallan and her book, Let's Talk Money, which I highly recommend. It's a very, very basic thing. Now, you might just remember the gullak and what we used to keep in our, when you were a child. The reason for doing that in a physical way was to actually remind yourself to continuously keep looking at it and continuously keep adding to it. Now, in the virtual world, we've replaced it. So having a separate bank account, which was actually only meant for this, I never, ever, in fact, I don't even remember trying to, remembering the password for that account. I just made sure that I kept money that kept going there. And then after some time, I actually put it in a liquid fund. So now I have it available in a liquid fund, and I know what people are going to say, because liquid funds have also been, questioned. This is not something that I'm advising. I just followed this advice because there was somebody in the family who does it, and I was very clear. Even if I got no return on it, I'm absolutely fine with it. I just want it in a place where it's safe, and I wanted to make sure that I can now use this bank account for some separate fund that I'm using. So that is one thing, that physically planning for it is the most important thing. And I call it physical planning because in your mind, you need to compartmentalize it and ask yourself, even if it's 5,000 rupees extra or it's 500 rupees extra, if it is in your current bank account, you'll either buy a stock now because stock buying is easy, or you buy clothes, or you'll pay off your credit card bill, or there'll be hazard other things that you need to do. You literally have to keep it aside. Second thing is to plan how much would you be needing, and that how much is where you need to take stock, just like Shinjini has said. This is what has worked for her, but she's given you a template of what works, which is sit down, plan it out. Because what you are able to plan out, and I'll give a small example again. If you're trying to buy a car, it's not a need. But if you're trying to actually save, for example, suppose there's somebody in the family who has to get a surgery, or there is some treatment that you need to get done, which is extremely expensive, you need to plan it out. And second thing would be all your credit cards, all the stuff that we take for granted because, it is giving us a lot back. Plan your money in advance about how much you're spending, and therefore what are you getting out of it. Whether it is yearly fees that you need to pay, whether it is reward points that you need to make, you have to plan it out in a way that you're not overspending on certain months to the point that you're actually having a revolving credit. And if you do, you need to pay it off. And I'm saying this for the young people who are out there, and same goes for people who have loans. I try to pay off a loan because I realized that the amount that I was paying for it was literally not helping me in any way. And my planning for the loan was also based on a similar aspect. I actually had a separate bank account which was associated with my EMI, which I never touched. Whenever there was an extra, I would send it, and then I would just talk to my bank account manager, and every 4 or 5 months, I would try to pay off. It may sound very pedantic, almost like too simple to be believed, but because this is happening at the back of your mind, it's always running. And Preeti has mentioned this before. It's actually really simple. Don't try to make it any more harder than it already is. Just keep doing it. It will become second nature to you.
That's actually, you've made it real for us. I think these answers are simple, but you always hear such fluffy dialogues around it that no one actually talks about what you should do. And I think many of the things that you mentioned, someone who's just starting out, it's such wise knowledge because you've actually been through the journey and you know the in and out of it. So it was great, great learning. We have some interesting questions from the audience that I will now be taking. The first one is for Preethi. When you were moving out of city to quite literally follow your passion, what is the one piece of advice you got that you are glad that you did not take?
The short answer is don't do it. So what happened was when I put in my papers, my vertical head literally took me into his office and he sat me down and gave me a dressing down, telling me that I had no idea what I was doing, that this was not going to end well for me. Because I feel like it was still an unheard of concept at the time, someone just quitting without a job and just going to, travel for a bit or whatever. But I feel like I'm just glad I didn't listen, because when you hear it often enough, you do tend to have that grain of self-doubt that creeps up again and again, especially when you're taking a massive life decision that literally nobody has prepared you for. But I'm glad I didn't take it, because I had done my homework, and I think that gave me a little bit of solid backing to go on. I had taken stock of my finances. I knew exactly how long I could last if I had to. It's almost 4 years now, just putting it out there. But I'm glad I didn't listen to don't do it, because sometimes it's just nice to go against the current. Yeah.
That's so true. When you hear it often enough, you do start believing it yourself. And I'm glad someone's sitting here who's saying otherwise. So it's great to have you here. The next question from the audience is for Shinjini. We keep hearing about building an emergency fund and a retirement corpus, but how does one go about deciding what would be a good amount for each of these? While I understand it will vary from person to person, is there a rule of thumb or something to start off with?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah. You know what I'll do? I'll ask Monica to give you the rule of thumb, or what Monica Harlan talks about, because I've also read Monica Harlan's book, but I think Monica Jasuja was telling me that she's actually followed it. So I'm going to let her first talk, and then I will basically come in to tell you how you individualize it. How do you make it? How do you personalize it? How do you make it for you? Because, so let's first just hear on the rule of thumb and how Monica did it, because I really wanted to ask her that question, and now that you have asked it, let me just get her to speak.
So Shinjini, I'll tell you a secret. I haven't followed it completely. That is, I have an emergency fund, which is, I'll tell you how I calculated my emergency fund. Okay. It was 5 months of my salary, and I kept about a month plus. So it was about 6 months of my salary, which I last earned. And that number that I put was based on my 1.5 years ago, and I just kept it at that number. It was a nice round number, and I never looked back at that. But I never, by the way, I know what you're speaking about because I've read it, but I haven't followed it to the T. So you'll have to do that.
Okay, so essentially, I think she also talks about a 5 or 6 months. And the important thing is that why 6 months? If you are in a job, then you expect that in that amount of time you will find another job. So depending on, so that's kind of where the rule of thumb comes from. But that situation can vary, because as I told you, in my case, for example, I would be looking at setting up a startup, right? So for me, it wasn't that I was going to start getting salary or get funded. And while you can have a time horizon, you would expect, you expect things to not happen according to that plan, right? So So I think one of the things you should take into account, you take that rule of thumb of 5 to 6 months, but please definitely take into account what is your, what's your likelihood of maintaining, of getting back to that lifestyle. The other thing I always encourage people to think about, and this is to exactly your question on how do you personalize it. Don't take it, all rules of thumbs are built on the assumption that people want to continue to live the lifestyle that they have. So even if you talk to a normal financial advisor or a retirement advisor, or an app that tells you how much saving you need to have to be able to live your life for 10 years or 30 years after you retire, it is all built on the basic assumption that you are going to be wanting to live the same lifestyle. Let me tell you the real thing that happens, because I think most old people, apart from medical expenses, are able to spend much less than what they do when they are young, right? Because your ability to travel reduces, your ability to, you have more than enough clothes in your wardrobe, you have more than enough shoes, you have more than enough bags. So you could be overdoing it. If you are actually depriving yourself today and denying yourself things that you can do when you are young and fit, because you think you need a massive amount of fund, you could just be making the other mistake. So do think about the kind of realistic life that you want to live. You may be living in a Mumbai expensive suburb, and you may have a plan to later move to a place that is less expensive than that. Especially with COVID and work from home, many people are making those type of choices. So definitely have an emergency fund, but keep that emergency fund more for things like medical expenses might crop up. And if you don't have an insurance, because most people, when they lose their job, they also lose their insurance. So that creates that need. So think about in very practical terms, what's actually going to happen when you go through an emergency. Is it going to be you? Is it going to be your parents? Do they have insurance? Do you have insurance? Do your children have insurance? So health emergency is the first thing that you should think about. Then you should think about things like, if you live in a rental house and you need to, sort of change, your landlord said change, you may have to pay a deposit, and you may not, the deposit may be higher than where you are. So some breakage like that you should factor in. The other, I think there were two parts to the question. One was the emergency fund, and the other was, what was that?
Retirement corpus.
Yeah. So as I said, for the retirement corpus, think about the actual lifestyle that you will have. Will you be living in the same city? Will you be living in a different city? Will your children, are your children likely to be, staying with you or not staying with you? Because sometimes you can have situations that might, that will be very unique to your family. So think about your retirement in very practical terms. Definitely think of health first when you think about both the emergency purpose as well as your retirement fund. But yeah, pretty much that is what I'll say.
No, that's awesome. I think that gives a great insight into starting to plan. And I think what I'm understanding from what all of you are saying is it's also a trial and error route. I see a lot of learnings that come out of actually trying it. And so that the first fear of trying when you're just starting out as a student is often there. So the next question is actually for Preethi, who's the youngest on the panel. What would you say are some of your tips for students or young professionals who are just starting out to start saving or start investing?
I think I'll speak from personal experience here, and I don't come with a background where financial education is really, given in terms of where to invest, how to invest, when to start, and all of that. But one thing that really helped me was talking to my peers and understanding how people are doing, how they're managing their finances. And I feel like money is a very taboo topic, but it should also be one that is spoken about, because at the end of the day, it's not something that you're taking away from someone else. It's literally helping you grow, and you're helping your own fund grow. So getting out of that taboo would be the first step. And second, I feel it's okay to start small, like with whatever income you have at any given point of time. Like Monica said, you put it in that gulak, right? You create a little fund for yourself. You start saving a small amount every month, invest it in either an SIP or an FD, whatever you feel comfortable with. But before that, talk to people, read a lot, and just, get started on your own financial education. And once you're able to kind of understand where your money needs to go, or how you want your money to grow, or what you're actually saving for, that's when you can start making the bigger decisions. But start early and start small. You don't need to be at like at a certain income level to actually start saving or investing. You can start with as less as 500 rupees a month or 100 rupees a month. It doesn't matter, because over time, money does grow. And I think, like Shinjini mentioned, right, just keeping it lying around, it's not going to benefit anyone, because ultimately you're losing against inflation. So start soon, start small, and read up as much as you can. And that is something that helped me, and it's definitely something that can help.
Shinjini, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to add, because I saw a question around what kind of funds are good for retirement planning, without getting into specific advice, because you need to understand I've been a financial services person for 30 years. So I always hedge myself when I come close to anybody saying I advised you. So, but I'll tell you something that is very, very important. And I just want to, because as I said, we are talking about budgeting and planning. Budgeting, we told you, you need to understand what's your short-term goal in life, what's your, 2 to 3 years, what's your long-term goal. According to that, you budget your current expenses, your current lifestyle, your future expenses, future lifestyle, and according to that, create your emergency fund, create your retirement fund. So that's your budgeting and planning exercise. When you actually then begin to execute on that plan, you have to think about, do I go to a financial advisor? Do I go to my uncle? Do I go to that bhaiya who, advised my mother? So everybody has somebody to go to. I will just say a couple of practical things. Please do not rely on people that actually sell products. And this is coming from somebody who's been a banker and therefore sold a lot of investments and insurance and various things. But at least as a bank or as an institution, you do try to put some guardrails around mis-selling. But I do want you to understand that there is very, very rampant mis-selling on many, many products. So the point that Preethi made about read a lot, I think that's a very good point. But having said that, it's also financial services somehow makes it very, I don't know what is it about financial services, but they just make it very, very hard for people to understand what we are talking about, what they talk about. So anyway, that's a separate problem that we will try to solve in a different way. And other people are also trying to solve in many different ways, and I hope that gets solved. But what I'm trying to emphasize on is very simple thing you need to understand is the value of diversification. So Monica Harlan's book, somebody asked that question about Monica Harlan's book, Let's Talk Money. And one of the good things I learned from her book was the value of early understanding of diversification of your asset. So if you will definitely want to put some money into equity, because as an asset class, equity is the asset class that has secular growth. So by the time you retire, if you start saving early, you should look at growth. You should not compromise on your ability to grow your money. So please do look at that. But having said that, you need to hedge that. You need to balance that with other asset classes that may not give you that much growth, but give you better liquidity and more safety. So please do understand that if you understand that basic phenomenon, that gold moves differently from debt, from equity, you will develop an understanding of basic diversification, right? And that I think is a principle that I'll just add to what Preethi was saying.
I have something to say to younger people who are listening, because exactly to what Preethi said, I hope everybody has heard this, but she said she invests in ATC. For younger people out there, please do think and understand the power of compounding. I never did know that principle until it was too late. I still feel I'm going to somehow beat it. And I feel that I will have time enough that I will start seeing the power of compounding and start becoming richer like Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett. But if I don't, I will remind myself that I actually withdrew all the money that I had in my PF, my first salary, everything that I had to invest in a house. And how stupid that decision was, because if I just consider the compounding of what would have happened, say when I did this when I was 23 till now, I would have probably just forget doubling. I don't even know what that amount of money would mean for me right now. So for younger people, please don't think about withdrawing from these kind of asset classes. Shinjini has mentioned this. Do your own research, but think about the aspect of what will happen. Yes, you are invincible and you can beat the world, but money is actually going to make sure that you beat the world even faster. So just invest in those instruments which will help you rather than debilitate you and push you back, because you'll make unwise decisions as you go along.
Wonderful. Great point, Monica.
That is all super, super valuable advice. I'm just happy that this is recorded so I can go back and take some notes, because I think anyone who's starting out, like in one room, to have all these different answers answered instead of reading hundreds of articles and YouTube videos and books, I think this has been very, very great. Now let's switch it up. It's all been great and valuable and wise, but let's make it rapid. Let's make it super fiery. So all speakers, be ready. We'll go one after the other. It's going to be a rapid fire round. Whatever comes first to your mind, you tell us. And That's about it. No consequences. Just be quick. Let's start with Shinjini. Since your mic is on mute, we'll take you first. Okay. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever stolen money as a kid?
No.
Have you ever dined and dashed?
No, I've been such a good girl. Oh shit, and there's not enough time left to do all of that. Oh, okay.
Society is happy to have you, I'm sure. Okay, name a Bollywood character that reminds you of money.
Bollywood character, Catch Me If You Can. Although not directly with money, but that's my favorite film when it comes to finances.
Awesome. Okay, would you rather get $1 million or relive your favorite memory?
Always my favorite memory, or anything over $1 million. Almost anything over $1 million.
Okay, what is your one guilty pleasure? It has to be materialistic that you don't mind splurging on.
I bought this house in Mukteshwar. I don't think there was a lot of argument on why I should not have bought it. I live in Bombay. Mukteshwar is very far. I'll not be able to live there, etc., etc. But it was just something that I just wanted, and I had to have it, so I bought it. Yeah.
That's a brilliant answer. Okay, you've done pretty great. I think this is the Karan Johar thing. Apart from being the nice person, you would have had great chances. Okay, let's go to Preethi.
I'm really sorry about being a nice person, but I will tell you one thing. I once did walk out of Target with 2 big shampoo and conditioner bottles without realizing they were in my cart because they were at the bottom of the cart. Nobody caught me. When I came to the parking, I realized. And then I was so scared to go back because I just didn't want to tell them. So yeah, that's the one wrong thing I've done that I remember.
So you targeted and dashed.
Yeah, I targeted and dashed.
Okay, Preethi, are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, fine. Let's start with you. Would you rather get $1 million or relive your favorite memory?
I'll take the $1 million because I don't want to change the memories from my favorite memories. So give me the money.
Very smart answer. Okay, name a Bollywood character that reminds you of money.
So the first thing that actually comes to mind is the movie The Italian Job. For some reason, I know it's about stealing money, but I just love that movie. So I'm going to go with that.
Okay, if money was a fruit, which fruit would it be? First thought, rapid.
Oh my God. I guess watermelon. I don't know because I love watermelon. So.
That's so nice in summer and tropically. I'm glad someone thinks about money in such a fun fashion. That's very good. Okay, have you ever dined and dashed?
I have unintentionally. So there was this time in Amsterdam where we asked for the check like 3 times. They never gave it to us. So we just walked out of there. But then we still think that it was because the guys at the next table just put in the bill for us. So.
Well, we say what we have to sleep at night. So it helps. Have you ever stolen money as a kid? No. Okay.
No.
You did great. You did very well. Don't worry. This is a good one. I'm glad everyone's being honest. Okay, Monica, are you ready?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Let's start with you. Would you rather get $1 million or relive your favorite memory?
Relive my favorite memory.
Awesome. Have you ever stolen money as a kid?
No, not as a kid. As an adult, I have. I have not stolen money. I've just taken money and forgotten to return it back. That's almost as good as stealing.
Yeah. Okay. What is your one guilty pleasure that you don't mind splurging on?
That would be food and donating for food. I don't talk about it, but I feel that that's not even something one should think about. Like, you should just do it.
Society has great people, guys. I have hope. Okay. Have you ever dined and dashed?
Yes, unintentionally. It happened in Delhi. That also. Imagine what would have happened if they'd caught me. But that was also a mistake. It was at Kake Ka Dhaba, which is in Connaught Place. They didn't give us a bill, and I nicely walked out. I just said, "ठीक है, आ जाएंगे पीछे," because that is the Delhi thing, ना कि कोई तो नहीं छोड़ेगा तुम्हें. I walked out. I had my butter chicken that day. That was probably the only time I've had butter chicken there, and it was stolen.
Butter chicken is a good memory. No, but that's about it. I think all of you have been.
So Disha, you caught me by surprise, and then I remembered the movie that I really liked was the £1,000,000 Note.
Oh, I actually haven't seen that.
It's a fantastic movie. It tells you about the power of money, actually. Yeah, the power of that. Okay. And there are more questions. So I don't know how much time do we have, but we should take a few more questions.
Sure, we can. Just give me a second.
Harshita? So I'll can I pick up the last question that I see on my screen?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Should I keep on investing money in PF accounts? I think you mean PPF, right? Because your EPFO is when you are working, and that deduction happens from your salary. And PPF is what you optionally invest. And this is to the earlier point of the reason I picked this question is because it speaks to the earlier retirement planning point that I was talking about. So you may be investing in equity for growth, but you should look at something like a PPF for a more stable and for a more stable return and a more certain return. So if you're not somebody who very actively manages your portfolio to optimize returns, then at least a portion of your saving you can continue to put in PPF for that stable return. It's better than FD. It's better than leaving your money in FD. And I know that I will get hate mail for this from people who think that they can manage their money very well and make a lot of money on top of it. But my advice to everyone always is to look at diversifying your portfolio. Look at some part of it for growth and some part of it for stability and liquidity. The problem in PPF is that it's not liquid, so it has a very long lock-in period. So you should know that. You should put in that money for your retirement and not for an emergency fund. So always know which part of your money you're saving for an emergency fund. That is where liquidity will count. And know what part of money you're saving for your retirement, which is where growth and stable returns will count. So as long as you are keeping that in mind, you should continue. You can continue. And I saw a bunch of questions around how do I start if I'm in my 40s and in my 50s. And ladies, please let me tell you, I'll just tell you something funny. I now go back and look at my pictures. So I went to study in the US when I was 30. I used to think I'm this old woman because I was going back to campus. And I used to always treat myself like an old woman. And much later, when I looked at my pictures, I was like, what the hell was I thinking? I was so pretty and I was just 30. And then when I was in my 40s, I thought I was this old woman. What was I doing here? And now I look at those photos and I'm like, oh my God, what was I thinking? I was only 40 and I was so pretty. So please, you will only get ahead. And so never think that where you are today is late, because there will hopefully, by God's blessing, be a later period, and you will look back and you will say, oh my God, I was only 50 and I was so stupid. So please go ahead and start doing what you have to do right now, right away.
That's such a nice note. I think the next question is for Preethi. Given the irregularity of your income, how do you plan for your investments? Like SIPs is not a monthly thing, then how do you plan for your investments?
Right. So SIPs used to be my jam when I was working, but when your income is, like you said, quite irregular. So now when I look at it, I try to do either lump sum MF or SPPs, or, like park my funds away and let it systematically go into an SIP when I get that bulk. So it's irregular, but at the same time, what I try to do is I try to allocate a larger sum, like how much I would normally do, with an SIP in a year. I try to just park it away as a one time because I know I have it at that moment. So that is one. And apart from that, I think even Monica's mentioned, right? I try to keep like a safety net. Like I maxed out that ADC at the start itself because I know that that's one thing that I'm not going to touch. That is literally my last leg fund. Like that's not something that I'm ever going to think about in the short term. So another thing I try to do is I try to really categorize, what I need for long term, what's like a short term thing, and what is immediate. And when it comes to long term, I tend to kind of prioritize that a little bit because I know that at some point in future, I may have to think about working around my career a little differently. So immediately, it's more about prioritizing where my money's at that moment, and then investing it at that moment itself without leaving too much, to irregularities that may or may not occur. So,
yeah, that's great. The next question is for Shinjini. What questions do you ask an investment advisor before picking one?
You know, that's a really great one. And I hope we have a little bit of time to talk about this, because I do want to bring in Monica to talk about this from the recipient side. Like, what questions do you ask your RM? I will tell you, because I've led a team of people, including relationship managers, and I have had different relationship managers. One of the things that I consider to be very core to your success as a individual who can manage your wealth well is the ability to just ask questions of anybody who seems to appear smarter than you. Just please remember that they are not smarter than you. You know your life, you know your goals, you know your money, you earn your money. Nobody has any business making you feel like they know more than you. That, I think, is just the crux of this whole thing, right? Because I have seen so many, I've walked into parties where my clients have come up to me and said, they love their RMs because their RMs are like their families. And the best RMs that I have met and I have dealt with are RMs who don't go around saying, you should do this, you should do that, but who invest a lot of time in actually understanding their clients, their psychological profile of what they are comfortable with, their family dynamics. They're not just their future goals in terms of saying, they want to set up an industry, but actually understanding the complexity of that, joint family or husband, wife, or who is the decision maker, and then working their way through that. So they owe it to you that they have to answer your questions. They are in the job to do the service. You are under no obligation to anybody to be, being talked down to. So please prep yourself to ask questions. And even if you think you're not asking the smartest, and of course, follow us on My Salt app. We'll tell you what questions to ask. But even if you're not asking the exact same questions, I think the important thing is to ask questions, even stupid questions, dumb questions. Just say, oh my God, you sound very smart, but I didn't understand a word of what you said. I met this very smart young girl, and she's a home baker. And she said, my RM came to talk to me, and she was talking to me, and I wanted to tell her, hey, why can't you talk to me nicely? I don't expect you to know how to make cake. Why do you expect me to know how to, what mutual funds are or whatever? So I think that attitude is something which is important to develop. But I'm going to leave this to Monica because I'm very passionate about this subject. I just want to say one thing, because we are sort of running out of time. We are going to have more sessions in this series, and we will talk about investing as a separate session, maybe even more than one session. I saw a bunch of your questions which can be addressed in those sessions. So please don't feel like we are not addressing everything. This one was a sort of a starting conversation about the importance of understanding, knowing, moving, asking questions. But I do want Monica to talk about how do you handle your RMs, because you are such an articulate woman. I can't imagine your RM, and how intimidated they would be.
So Shinjini, I'll tell you a secret again. He's been trying to contact me since last many weeks, and I've not responded. And he's responded to me now because I needed some help for a friend of mine. I've never had a good RM, and they've tried to sell me policies. And when I've asked them questions, and exactly to your point, ask them questions. So the last policy that was being sold to me was about a guaranteed income plan and all that. I said, just give me the returns, and he helped me understand the returns, which was a very inflated high number. I said, after taxes, etc., then it was coming down to be even lesser than FD. I said, you tell me one thing. If would you invest in it? He said, no. I said, why are you asking me to invest? He's now understood, so he doesn't send me those policies. But yes, he knows that I've been trying to invest in stocks, and I really value his advice because he does kind of follow up. He tells me exactly when the market is down. He tells me, ma'am, you should be looking at this. He knows that everything is finally going to his account, but I like the fact that he's understood that I'm not going to just invest in anything. And he's seen me also through a policy which I complained to Monica Hallan about because I was like, this guy should be put in jail.
So we will have a session on insurance, and please, everybody, please join, and please ask your friends to join, because insurance is really the and like the guaranteed plan that you talked about, Monica, and various other things. I think in insurance, it is the most important to ask the right questions and to understand why are you buying that insurance. Investing is a little bit different, but I agree. And this whole hybridization of products and, trying to work through different type of returns on different type of liquidity profiles, etc. So we will elaborate this more, but right now I think we are short of time. So I don't know how much time do you have, Disha, please.
Unfortunately, and it makes my heart sad to say this, but we don't have too much time, so we will be closing. But thank you, Shinjini, Monica, and Preethi. It's been an absolute pleasure hosting you today. The session has been extremely valuable to me personally, I'm sure, and to the audience. To those of you who joined us today, thank you for being a part of this session. We'll be back in 2 weeks with an investing masterclass, which is exciting in the name itself. But until then, if you have thoughts, questions that weren't answered here, we can continue this discussion on Instagram. You can write to us at MySaltApp and Sipping Thoughts on Instagram. We can definitely continue the journey there. But that's from my side. If you speakers have any thought you want to close with, or any final words?
One final word from everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for this, Shinjini. I think it's been a really interesting session. Thanks, Disha. Amazing questions. And even I have been taking notes, because there's so much that you can keep learning when it comes to finance. And I look forward to the session in the next 2 weeks as well. But thank you so much for letting me be a part of this panel.
Monica?
Just two words to say: take charge and read. Actually, that was 4 words, but also thank you, Shinjini, for inviting, and I'm looking forward to the investment master class as well. I want to invest in stocks and IPOs and all that good jazz.
Yeah, just
words you were leaving us with, Monica?
Sorry?
I think I missed your first line, or I didn't hear you. What did you say you were leaving us with?
Oh, I said take charge.
No, right? It's just me. Exactly when you say those words, they vanish.
Really? I'll write it down.
Okay. Shinjini.
So take charge and read. That's from Monica. And, I have always been asked many questions from women about how to continue in my career, how to do this, saving or retirement planning. I always have only one simple answer: just do it. Like, there is nothing like doing. And remember, there is a price to learning. When you buy that one pair of shoes, you have no idea whether you will actually wear them for one day and they will bite you, you'll never wear them, or you will wear them for the rest of your life and they'll become your favorite shoes and return you every single penny you spent on them. But when you buy an investment, you want an underwriting for the profile of that investment. Like, why? Just think about it a little bit more chill. No, just buy it, you'll learn. Just do it. Thank you.
That's very, very valuable. I think if you want to hear more on Shinjini, definitely follow MySaltApp. We'll make sure she does a whole takeover with her valuable lessons. So just in for that. Okay, thank you so much for everyone who came.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Hey, thank you, ladies. It was great fun.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Very good job, Disha. Really very nice. Where's Harshita? I don't see her on my screen.